Hey, this is Danny here from Podcast Stories. Thanks so much for listening, and I'd love for you to get the latest episodes when they're released. So make sure to follow on your favourite podcast app or hop on over to podcasterstories.com/listen. If you enjoy the show and want to support it, you can do that at podcasterstories.com/support to join other supporters just like you. Thanks so much for being part of the Podcaster Stories community. And now, here's this week's episode.
Instantaneously, I was paralyzed. So I was told I would never walk again, possibly not move from my neck down. And later on, doctors advised my family to put me in a nursing home at the age of 19 because I'd be too much of a burden for them to provide care for. And so can you imagine 19, someone's going to a nursing home? I mean, I understand it happens, but it's just hard to believe something like that goes on.
Hi, and welcome to Podcaster Stories. Each episode will have a conversation with podcasters from across the globe and share their story, what motivates them, why they started a show, how they grew the show, and more. We'll also talk about their personal lives and some of the things that have happened that have made them the person they are today. And now here's your host, Danny Brown. Hi, and welcome to Podcaster Stories, the show that gets to meet the people behind the voices of the shows we listen to. This week, I'm speaking with James Perdue, host of the Professor of Perseverance podcast, a show that encourages you to face challenges head-on and winning through difficulties. James, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you coming on, and I know we've got a really interesting episode coming up today. How about you introduce yourself and your podcast?
And again, I go by the Professor of Perseverance. A good friend of mine bestowed that on me one day. He says, he called me one day, we were talking, he says, "Hey, Professor of Perseverance." I said, "What?" And his name's John Bentley. I give him credit. And he said, "Yeah, you're the Professor of Perseverance." I said, What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you have a doctoral degree, don't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, Professor, and you want to go talk about perseverance, don't you?" "Yeah." "Well, you're the Professor of Perseverance." So that's how we come up with the tag and branding, Professor of Perseverance. And what had happened is I got my neck broke playing football. I was 2 weeks into college on a baseball scholarship. But one day, people on campus were playing football, just no pads, no helmet, no protective gear. And I scored one touchdown. The guy was more serious about the game than me because when I turned around towards everyone after scoring a touchdown, touchdown, the play's dead now, we're over with. So I'm putting the ball down, turning around towards everyone. I see something on the right side of my peripheral vision. I have no idea what it is, but I see something. I felt a contact on my shoulder. And then I heard a loud pop, and both those went to the ground. And instantaneously, I was paralyzed. So I was told I would never walk again, possibly not move from my neck down. And later on, doctors advised my family to put me in a nursing home at the age of 19 because I'd be too much of a burden for them to provide care for. And so can you imagine 19, someone's going to a nursing home? I mean, I understand it happens, but it's just hard to believe something like that goes on.
I can't imagine. I was going to say I can imagine, but I can't because obviously I'm not in your position. But as you mentioned it, at 19, that must have been like something very scary to face. What were your thoughts at that time?
Laying on the ground, I realized I was paralyzed because you did those three things. They say three's a charm on things. So I tried to get up one time and lift my head to get up because when I heard the loud pop, I thought my collarbone broke, is what I thought, because I felt the contact up high. I didn't know it was a spinal cord injury at that moment. So I tried to get up and lift my head. Nothing else came up. My shoulders didn't come up, my stomach, arm, bending, legs didn't move. So I put my head back down, taking a few breaths, and someone made some comment, and so I was going to try to get up again. So I lift my head, nothing came up again. So I put my head back down, and a three is a charm, right? So I thought, all right, we'll get everything all together. Tried it a third time, still nothing happened. The thought that instantaneously came into my head was a man named JT. JT came in my head right then and there. I saw JT in my memory and just knew. And JT, what's so important about JT is back when I was 14, 15 years old, my grandfather was in a nursing home, so I used to go visit him. One day I go to visit, room before my grandfather's, a gentleman, I guess, had just been moved in over there at the nursing home. He says, "Hey, bud, come here for a minute." And I go into his room, and his name was JT. And he asked me, could I hold his glass of water for him with a straw to get a drink? And I held it for him. And I found out that he was a spinal cord injury from a car accident in his mid-30s. And so in my mind, I'm going at the age of 19, I'm going to be in a nursing home. And again, professionals later confirmed that to my family that they should put me in one, which thankfully they didn't. But JT came in my head during the process right at the very beginning.
Now, did you ever get to, during the recovery process, I guess, did you ever get to speak with JT again?
Yeah. I would. When I was younger, I would stop in his room every now and again just to go say hello and see if he needed any help and stuff, and then go about seeing my grandfather. But yeah, I used to go and talk to him again, at 14, 15, you're trying to be polite to your elders. And, and as you get older, you realize a lot of these people in the nursing home, they don't get visitors every day. My grandfather, somebody was seeing him every day, even if it was my mom and grandmother seeing him. And that way they would help him at supper time, help get him clean, help get his bed ready for him. Every night they were there 5 o'clock to 6, 5 to 6:30 to make sure he was comfortable. Plus, it keeps the nursing home on their toes. You know how some are neglect so much. And so when I went to go see JT, I wasn't doing it because feeling guilty or that he may not have someone. It was just the polite thing to do now that I've met him, just being respectful to him. And I think maybe 2 months later, he was in the nursing home. I don't know whatever happened to him.
It's interesting you mentioned about the, at 14, 15, it was being polite and making sure that people, the elderly had visitors. I know before COVID hit here in Canada, at least in the village, where we live, our school, our local kids' school, had a program like Adopt a Grandparent almost, where the kids would go to, care homes, long-term care homes, to talk and just hang out with older people to ensure that ones that didn't get visitors had someone to talk to and keep their mind active, etc. So it sounds like very similar to what you were doing as a kid too.
That's a great program. Again, it teaches kids life is not all about them. And so I'm glad that my family raised me to be somewhat respectful. Now, don't get me wrong. I got in my mischief. I got in my little troubles. Yeah, I was still a kid. But I knew when I was around an elderly, I had better be on my best behavior, or mom and dad would give me the confrontation, the talk that I needed to learn to be respectful. Not that they were abusive or anything, but they sure let me know. And, we would rather take a spanking or put in time out or whatever than hear the words from our parents, I'm disappointed in you. And so that hurts more than any punishment can give. So, we would try to avoid the I'm disappointed.
Do you think that's maybe, and I'm not sure, but do you think that's maybe like a southern thing? I always find that the southern part of the US is very respectful towards elderly and respectful of parents, etc., whereas maybe less so as you go away from the south and into certain parts of Canada. Is that something that's been instilled and continues to be instilled, or is that just like a stereotype that I apologize for being completely wrong?
Yeah. No, I believe it's a stereotype. I believe there's plenty of people up in other areas of our states. They're just respectful. But then you can go to the South where they're very much disrespectful. So it's the same. It's depending on who you're with and where you're at, and it's the same thing. So I believe it's pretty much the same, balanced out.
Now, your show premiered in June last year. And from the start, it shared some incredibly inspiring stories of overcoming adversity. Is there a process that you go through for choosing guests and the types of stories you want to highlight, or how does that work for your show?
On my show, yeah, I look for people that are definitely overcome their adversity, and that way they can share what they went through, share how they got through it, to encourage and give hope for someone else listening. And so I try to talk on the first. Don't want to say weed them out, because I do want them to have an opportunity to share. I do want that. But also I want to make sure they're really over their challenge, because if you, I talked to one guy one time, and he just sounded so negative, sounded like he was still hurt from it. He sounded like he was, and I'm going to myself, I didn't want to hurt his feeling, but you're not helping anyone if you're not helping yourself. And so I try to make sure that they're truly over whatever situation they're into. So, and I give them a great example. People talk about me being positive and people being, overcoming and what all I've accomplished, what I've succeeded in. And I said, you would have never bet on it the first 5 years of my injury. I tried my best to be happy and positive, but when that door was closed, when I went to bed, how many times I cried myself asleep. I put the whole front and face on in front of the public, but I wouldn't have been good for a podcast or anything back then.
And I can imagine as well that both my wife and I suffer from mental health issues, and to your point, where you put a face on sometimes in public and behind the scenes, it can be a different story. I can imagine, did that hinder your progress during these times, or do you feel that was part of you getting to where you are today?
They say they go through the 5 stages of grief, and whatever. And, first part is one of them is denial and everything. And so, being an athlete, I had that mentality that I was invincible, that I was going to do what I needed to. Nothing was going to stop me to be able to be an athlete. And so I kept that mentality as I was trying to recover more and for my injury. And part of my denial is I was in a wheelchair. I went to 18 different rehabs in 5 years trying to find that cure to walk again. A bunch of them are one-day evaluation. I drive one time 18 hours to spend 15 minutes for the doctor to say, no, we can't do anything to help you. Or, a one-day trip to Atlanta to spend 2 hours with them to check me out. No, we can't do anything to help you. You come as far as you can and then come back. So part of it, I was looking for that cure to walk again. And then whenever I heard no or didn't get what I wanted, then I would slide a little bit depressed, but still trying to hide it from everyone because there was another no. There was another no more to get out of the wheelchair. And so finally what had happened is at around 5 years, I went to one place and I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't do it at the time. But now when looking back, I actually lied to my family and lied to myself. And what I told them was, I said, not that I'm giving up walking, but I need to put it on the back burner. And if I want to have any type of life, I need to finish my college degree. I need to look for a job. I need to be like everyone else, the best I can be. I said, and again, not that I'm giving up on the walking, but I need to focus on other things in life. Well, years later, looking back, is when I finally accepted what's going on, because I've never been to a rehab since then in 30 years looking to walk. Now, I've gone to rehabs to try to build some other strength and learn how to pivot and transfer better, stuff like that. But to walk, I've never been to one since then.
And it's like, I think you mentioned earlier as well, being 19, full of life, you're an athlete, you're like a fine physical specimen, if you like. It takes, I guess it takes a lot to get from that mindset into, okay, I'm accepting that I may never walk again. This is what I need to do. How much of a challenge was that for you?
I tell people, don't take the doctor thing too seriously. I mean, I did work and get one, but I tell people, I say, now I can't write out prescriptions for you, but I could drive you to your pharmacist if you need me to pick them up like that. So it took, a lot of work. Don't get me wrong with that. But when I graduated high school, I was a C man, C average. I just did just enough in school to stay eligible so I could play sports. That was it. Just enough. So after I finally put everything on the back burner and went back, and during this first 5 years, we got a community college where I live down the road. It's a 2-year school. And so I would go 1 or 2 semesters and quit, go 1 semester, quit, go another year and a half, quit. And finally, when I put everything over with, said this is what I need to do, my brother, older brother, he's the one that said, all the focus you had on playing sports, all your determination, all your motivation, everything you used to be able to be an athlete. Now you need to direct that mindset to your studies so you can graduate to help you in the long run. And so as for my wise older brother.
And then you mentioned, obviously, for your show, that you have a very set way of vetting guests, for want of a better description, because they have to have overcome the adversity that they've gone through. And listening to your show, I've been listening to the last few weeks now, and I come away from every single episode with a vast appreciation of life and living it. Because the stories that are being shared they're incredible, and I highly recommend anybody to listen to the show and the episodes. Has there been anyone or any episodes that have maybe stood out in particular when you were chatting to the guests, and if so, why these ones or why that one?
There's two that I've had not other people ask me that same question, but similar something that I come back to these two people. One of them is Captain Charlie Plum, one of my early ones that I had on my podcast. Back in the late 60s, he was in the Vietnam War. He flew planes. He was on his 75th mission, and he said his last mission. And how many times you've heard people, this is the last thing I'm doing, or I'm retiring in a month, and then, then something happens to them. How many times you hear, like, for example, when I was playing football that day, I said, my team got the ball back. We'd been out there about 2 hours. I said to him, I'm done playing. I need to get my stuff ready for college, class the next day. So I walked out of the huddle. I heard someone say, we need someone to run the ball. So I stopped and turned around and said, all right, I'll come back for one more play. And that one play put me where I'm at today. Broke my neck. Well, same thing with Captain Charlie Plum. He said he was on his last mission, 75th mission flight, last mission. He gets shot down. And he becomes a prisoner of war in Vietnam for nearly 6 years. And he told his story of, the torture, the mental aspect, the physical abuse, starvation. And what was worse than that is they were not allowed to communicate with any other prisoner. They were in individual cells. And so he told the story about how they learned to communicate without them knowing what was going on. He said they would cough, spit, choke, and they each represent something in the alphabet to communicate back and forth. Or if they were chopping wood, they would chop in a certain pattern for everybody, like Morse code, for everybody to figure it out. The guy, the next cell over beside him, somehow slid a string through a hole and had a note attached to it. And he read it, and it had the alphabet on how many tugs, like, again, Morse code, on the string, and then we can communicate. And then even told in the note, now eat this note, swallow it, don't let them catch it. So they would slide the string back and forth, and they're tugging it so they can communicate with each other. Amazing that they would be able to do that. And so, but then another one, he's become my mentor, W. Mitchell. W. Mitchell, he back in the late 60s, he was riding a motorcycle, got hit by a vehicle. His motorcycle burst into flames. He got 60% of his body burnt, face scarred up, lost all his fingers and hands burnt off, 60% of his body, doing all his skin grafting. He finally recovered from all that. 4 years later, he's learning to fly these planes, these Cessna planes. And he has some people in there with him. He came down to land, and it bounced on the tarmac a little bit as he's landing. Everybody walks out of the plane doing good. Time for him to get out. When it bounced, it broke his back. Now, he's paralyzed. Going through one tragedy, that's horrific as enough. Now you got two major tragedies. You're burnt and paralyzed. And so W. Mitchell has become a mentor to me. And he his quote is saying, I used to be able to do 10,000 things. Now I can only do 9,000. I don't concentrate on the 1,000 I can't do. I'm concentrating on the 9,000 I can do.
And that sounds like one of the things I was curious. Obviously, you have a lot of guests with very inspiring stories, and you shared two there. Do you take is there lessons that you take from? Obviously, you're inspiring yourself, your story, and you're how you've, overcome your adversity and what happened when you were 19. Are there things from your guest stories that you've taken, that you've taken and implemented in your own life? Like you've just mentioned at W. Mitchell, now doesn't worry about the 1,000 things he can't control. He'll just worry about the 9,000 he can. Is there things that you've taken for your own life?
I try to, if nothing else, I tell our guests, as I tell them that, we do ours live on YouTube. And that way, if any of my subscribers come in listening, if they have some questions I'm not thinking of, they can ask as well. And so, but I tell them, say, I've had as many as over 20 that's come in listening. I have a little as 0 come in at that time. But that doesn't mean being evergreen. They won't pop in later and something. But I tell them, I say, hey, if nothing else, I say, you're going to inspire me. Yes, so that's I'm going to benefit out of it, no matter who, what you're saying and how many we get at the time. So you're good for one.
And that's it. I know certainly a lot of friends that I have that are podcasters don't really care about the audience size. The validation is getting an email or getting a tweet or something from a listener who really connected with an episode because of the story that was told, and it's helped him refocus on something that they can do or refocus their life, etc. So I think to your point, like the validation, if there's 0 listeners at that particular time, there's always opportunity that one person is going to be impacted afterwards.
And the great thing, Danny, is that they say this stuff on the internet, so it's going to be the same thing with podcasts, is here forever. Once it's imprinted, it's out there forever. So, who's to know in 100 years from now, when we're all dead and gone, we're going to be touching someone else in 100 years. It may find these.
Well, that's it, right? You never know. I look back now at some of the old TV shows that I used to love, and I'm kind of cringe when I sort of look at them and think, well, you know what? That's not really a good thing to be enjoying it. But I now wonder what my kids would think of it. If they were like getting to the age I was when watching them, would they enjoy it? Would they think that was ridiculous? How did that ever take place?
It's amazing with technology. It's all amazing how the special effects and everything all is. And these kids see all the special effects. But if they were watching a show back in the 50s, 60s, 70s like we used to, there was a lot of work to put into a special effect. Now it's all digital. And so a lot of work. But these shows nowadays, I don't know how it's like up in Canada, but they're too much, to me, sexual innuendo into it. Sometimes I can understand cussing a little bit, but when you go too far, the TV, it's none of the innocent lesson learning things like Leave It to Beaver or Andy Griffith, stuff like that that's out there today. I used to coach baseball and basketball, and I would tell the parents that you need to be sure you take interest in what your child is doing, because if you don't, they're going to find something they're really interested in. They're not going to include you in it, and you may not like it. So when they're into sports or dancing or singing, you need to go at it with 100% to show them. Because again, if you're not showing any interest, they're liable to, drop into drugs, drop into whatever, pornography, jump into drinking, alcoholism. And not to say the alcohol, depending on what drug, the marijuana, may not be as bad or whatever, but you may not be happy with what they choose if you don't show interest.
No, I completely agree. We recently watched the Tom Hanks movie where he played Mr. Rogers, and the kids had never heard of Mr. Rogers. To be honest, I'd never heard of Mr. Rogers because I'm from the UK originally, and he's more a North American thing. But my wife, she's Canadian, she was speaking about Mr. Rogers, so I started watching some YouTube videos. Thought, wow, just the lessons he shared in what would seem a very innocuous child show, but the lessons he shared. So the kids loved that, and to your point, I think we tend to try and make kids grow up too soon by creating TV shows or media or whatever that has messages they don't need. And to your point, I think something like a Mr. Rogers, or the shows you mentioned, we need more of that today as well.
We used to grow up with Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street with Big Bird and Ernie and Bert. There's another one, the Electric Company was another one that was similar to those. And, we'd catch in things first thing in the morning before we start our day, getting ready for school. Here we are watching them. And so, yeah, they need to have more of those lessons easier for the kids to get to. Again, even when they're saying this stuff is PG-12 or whatever, I still think it's too risque for 12. It ought to be up there, 18. And I think they're like I said, they're doing this subliminal, subconscious stuff, they buried in their brain, where the kids don't understand what's going on, but they're hearing it and listening to it, watching it, and it's burying and it's going to have an impression on them as they get older.
And speaking of Sesame Street, I mean, we're recording this for the audio show, but we're in a video green room. Looks like you've got a Sesame Street T-shirt on. Everything.
There we go, Big Bird and Cookie Monster. That's right. Awesome. So yeah, I didn't even think about that when we were talking about it. There you go. And it says, of course, it's in reverse for me. I don't know if it's right for you, but it says, everything I know I learned from Sesame Street.
No, I saw that when we switched the cameras on, and I just loved it immediately, because I loved watching Sesame Street growing up. It's like one of the shows, then sort of Korean and the Muppets afterwards, because it seemed a natural progression. So I just wanted to highlight that. I thought it was like perfect that you were speaking about the lessons from the show, and you've got a T-shirt on right there. That's awesome. You mentioned that when the accident happened, and for maybe 5 years, I think, after the accident happened, you were lying to your family and putting on a face and being more positive, I guess, than you were feeling. And I know sometimes a lot of people have this sort of philosophical, well, what if conversations with themselves. What if something happened? What if I wasn't able to do this? And sometimes that can be a good thing, sometimes maybe a not so good thing, depending on what happens next. And I'm curious, did you ever have any what if conversations with yourself? And if so, what sort of got you over that, so to speak?
The what ifs, I tell people the what ifs and the why me. I don't really remember going through those. I mean, the kids, of course, the first 5 years, I was so convinced I was going to walk again that it was going to take just hard work and determination. So I don't know if I remember the why me. Now, later on in life, have I done the why me or the what if situations? And I just tell people, you can do the what if all you want to. It's not going to change your situation, what you're into. So now it's what if I try but fail? Well, at least if you tried and failed, whatever you're trying to do is not going to work. So now let's try something different to still accomplish what your main goal is. There's we'll just say there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I would tell people there's more than 10,000 ways to skin a cat if you figure it out. Thomas Edison said he 10,000 tries before he finally got the light bulb right. And he says, people said, well, you failed 10,000 times. He goes, no, I found 10,000 ways it won't work. Then I finally found a way it would. So my thing on the what if is now, what if you don't try? You don't know what you can do. And I'm a firm believer that we go through certain situations in life because we need to know how strong we really are. I've had other people say, I couldn't do what you're doing in your wheelchair and get up and go like that. And I said, well, you don't know because you're not in a wheelchair. I said, I've never been through cancer, but I don't know if I can deal with that. So I've never been a diabetic, so I don't know if I can deal with that. But I've never been through it. So I think when we go through some things, it's to prove and show us how strong we really are in life. And so I think we could quit the what if I can't. Try it. If it doesn't work, move on. Find something else to do. Try it. If it doesn't work, hey, how important is you? If it's still important to you, find a way to do something different and get it there. And so I think it's better to do the what if it doesn't work, to just try it. And if you say you succeed at it, then you go, I don't like this. But at least you tried it and find out I didn't like it.
And that reminds me of the mindset of Steve Jobs. Reading his story, I got his autobiography. Was it his autobiography? It might have been his biography. I got his book and read about him and the other Steve Wozniak. I can never say his surname properly. And how they took that mindset that you just mentioned, James, about, okay, we blew, we were a big failure with this first Apple iMac or whatever it was. But we kept going because we realized that these conductors aren't really good for this kind of process and so on. And I think, I know there's a lot of talk about, say, helicopter parenting, where we take away the risk of a lot of the stuff that our kids could do compared to what we might have done as kids when we were younger. And I wonder if we need to, Stop being that kind of, well, you don't do that because you might scrape your knee. You might bang your elbow. It's like, go ahead, let them scrape their knee. They won't scrape their knee the next time. Going back to your point, I think.
And again, I think at some point, they got to, and I'm not a parent, so I'm sure I'm totally wrong with all this. But to me, I'd much prefer getting out and scraping my leg, and even if I fell and broke an arm, than being bubble wrapped to protect me from life. Because then when you're old enough to do what you want to do and mom and dad's not there, you may not have the right mindset to come up with the right decision to be able to do what you need to do or want to do, and may get in more trouble than you want. So I think they need to do a lot more. And I understand with some health disabilities, like I had a friend, his heart was born outside of his ribs. So under the skin on the outside. So here he was days old having his first open heart surgery to put his heart back where it belonged. And I can understand you need to bubble wrap them because you don't want them to really hurt themselves. But once you realize the first time they fall, they're like other into kids, give them some more leeway and go. Because again, it teaches them when they get older to make better decisions in life as well.
And it might just take a lot. I remember when our kids were younger, our son, he's 10 now, he's going to be 11 in May. And he used to love running helter-skelter around the house when he was about maybe 4 or 5 year old. And he'd run in, one time he ran into the kitchen worktop. And it was like the corner of the kitchen worktop. So he had a mushroom or a boiled egg-sized bruise in his head.
There you go.
And you think, well, he's going to learn. No, he didn't. He did it another 2 times before he stopped. So sometimes you have to make sure you get hurt before you learn that lesson, right?
Make sure they're not breaking anything. Other than that, live and learn.
Now, one of the things that I really enjoyed learning about you and reading your story is you really took, you went out and grabbed the life bull by the horns. You mentioned before you coach kids. You received your doctorate degree in 2011. So looking at the stuff you're doing, when your accident happened back in 1983, would you have ever imagined being where you are today and achieving the stuff you're achieving and continue to achieve?
Oh, no. When I first got injured, again, JT, the nursing home thought come in my head, even though with my mentality of being invincible, that was still downshifted at the beginning because we've never been through this, right? Our family, me, have never been through a spinal cord injury and not walking. But we as a family, again, I'm glad that, and I tell people, I said, I credit everything I've done by 3 things. One, God, he knew the family to put me into before I was even born, that this family was going to be with me all along. And they sacrificed so much for me to be where I'm at. 2, thankful for the friends and everything like that. And family, family, friends, and God for putting me there. So, and giving me the mentality to be determined and everything. But no, I no. When I first injured, because we've never been through this, so I didn't know a spinal cord injury person. Now I went to school with one guy. He was 2 years younger than me in high school, and he had multiple sclerosis or a muscular dystrophy type, one of the diseases. And so I've met him in a wheelchair, and again going to see nursing home and see older people in wheelchairs. But someone my age, other than the guy I went to school with, we never knew a spinal cord injury. So we never knew what to expect. For example, my driver's license came and it was time to renew, came in the mail. And I told my mom, said, I just throw it in a trash can. She said, well, you never know, you might be able to drive again. And said, I never met anybody in a wheelchair that was driving. And I said, Mom, I'll never drive again, just throw it away. And she says, well, don't you want to renew them just so you have an ID if someone needs it for something? I said, if they need an ID, I'll go buy an ID. I said, it's cheaper than the driver's license. And so, well, lo and behold, who wanted to learn to drive again? After 2 years of mom taking me somewhere, my brothers taking me somewhere, always depending on them. I'd go to class, like I said, I'd go to start a class, quit some, but I'd tell my class be over at 1:00, and then I'm waiting there to 2:00 outside for them to come get me. And so I went back to get my driver's license. And again, other people I mentioned earlier about how God has put people in and out of my life. So when it was time for me to learn to drive again, they had those hand controls put in so I can take my left hand and push down to the floor, makes the gas work, and you push it into the dash is the brake, and then you put your other hand on the steering wheel. Well, those things were, at that time, were $500. Well, I didn't have $500 to do that. I was in class one day and got talking to this one woman, and she told me at that time, had adopted over 20 disabled, handicapped children throughout her life to be a foster parent to that type of children. And so I explained to her about wanting to drive again, but I'd have the money for the hand controls. She comes to class the very next day and hands me an envelope with $500 cash and said, "Here, go start driving now." And she said, "All I ask when you get your license and get everything, just come back and pick me up and take me around the block." Wow. So people are amazing during that time. But yeah, long story there, wasn't it? To go back to it again, no, I never thought I would be where I'm at today at the very beginning. But when you reach success, it encourages you for more success. And so again, to learn to drive again was the most independent thing I've ever had after 2 years of waiting for someone else to help me do things, to drive me to somewhere, drive me to class, drive me to the store, drive me to pay bills, drive around in circles just to be driving, and now here I can do all that by myself again. The independence that came from all that. And one day I was going in, I think they said they saw me going to a Wendy's to go get something to eat. And one of my instructors saw me, and the next few days I was in class, she says, "James, I think I saw you driving the other day." And so sometimes I get a little facetious in me. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But don't tell my mom." I said, I had to take her broomstick and use it as the gas and brake. I said, and she's already warned me not to be doing that, so please don't tell my mom. But it seemed like they were more surprised that I was driving than I was.
And we were speaking earlier before we started recording about your awesome dog. I'm guessing now that just being able to jump in the car and go to the beach and take the dog out, and that must be pretty cool and make you glad you didn't just throw that idea away forever.
Oh, I'm glad. Yes. Again, it's so much independence. And I've talked to other spinal cord people. Do not let your driver's license expire. Technology changes so much. There's people that are weaker than me in my arms, weaker than me, and they're driving nowadays because technology has made it so easy. So I encourage you, don't give it up. And my boy Ricardo, he's an amazing dog. He's my first service dog. He's an older one now. He'll be turning 13 in May, and he'll be turning 13. I've had him nearly 11 years. He's an amazing dog again. I told you he's got 5 children's books about him, and we took different types of disabilities. One guy was going through a cancer, and it's basically the story in the book's true. We kind of fictioned it at the end because the boy ended up real life dying of cancer. And so the family gave me their story to use. And so in the children's book, I don't want kids to be afraid of cancer if they got it. So he got healed in my book, and then him and Ricardo went hunting. And so here you see them both out hunting, and Ricardo's retrieving a duck to bring back to the guy Isaac in that one. So, but he's got his own Christmas book where he helps Santa and meets Rudolph in it.
That's awesome. And I know, like we'd spoken earlier about the inspiring kind of TV shows that we used to watch, and it'd be great to have that now. And your books sound as if they follow that pattern. We were speaking earlier about how Ricardo helped the kid that had, was it autistic?
Autism, yes.
Autism kids, yeah.
Yeah, what happened there is we were at the store, and one woman come up and said, "Can my son pet your dog?" And the son was in a shopping buggy cart. And I said, "Sure." And so I got Ricardo to get up on my lap so the boy from the buggy can pet his head. And then all of a sudden the boy points at Ricardo and says, "Dog." I said, "Yeah, buddy, he's a dog. You're right. Good job." And I look over at Mother, and Mother started crying some. And I go, "Oh, ma'am." And I put Ricardo down. I said, "I don't know what Ricardo did." I said, "I apologize for it, though." She says, No, it's not him. It's not the dog. You don't understand." And then she says, "My son is autistic." And that's the very first word I ever heard him say. And the boy had to have been 4 or 5 years old. And so in the book, it's "Can My Son Pet Your Dog?" It's a little children's book. And we go on about autism, and we talk about a little bit And I try to explain that the professionals and people that are working with these people, autistic, the information is getting in. They just, because of the wiring, what's going on, they're having trouble getting it back out. But and the proof of that again is he called Ricardo a dog. He pointed and said dog. He didn't point and say cat. He didn't point and say doorknob. He didn't point and say a car. He said dog. And so that was enough proof for me. They're getting the information in. They're just having trouble getting it back out.
And then obviously the innocence of the child and the dog. It's just that's when you told me, it was like amazing. You know, it's like, so I'm definitely going to be. Your books are available to buy on Amazon as well as your site, correct? Or
Amazon.
Yep, awesome.
Yes.
I'll be getting my books for the kids because as I say, it's like hearing a couple of the stories that you mentioned, Dan. It's the stuff that inspires. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
No, for sure. Now your show's been going almost a year now. June, I think it'll be celebrated its first anniversary in June.
In June, correct.
And you do it as a live stream on YouTube. And I see some videos, obviously, filtered over to Instagram. What's your goals for the future of the show? Are you going to keep the same format, or you've got different ideas for it, or?
At the moment, it just keep going the way we're doing. Someone's mentioned about maybe if we can maybe add 3 people instead of just me and one person, and maybe 2 of the people with similar spinal cord injuries or similar going through cancer or similar muscular sclerosis or muscular dystrophy, something similar. And then like to have them compare and contrast with each other and let me host. And so someone mentioned that. So that may be a possibility as well. So other than that, I'm a firm believer we're here to help inspire, motivate, encourage others to reach their best potential as possible. And so, that's the thing is, it's just want to reach out and hopefully we're helping other people. And what you're doing, Danny, I appreciate what all you're doing. I mean, people out there are getting inspired and motivated for who you're bringing on as well to help them. Again, and the amazing thing when I received, I tell people it took me 8 years to get a 2-year degree. But when they had a breakfast and award ceremony the day before the graduation. And so I ended up going to the breakfast. I took my mom with me. So we're listening to all these people because I knew I wouldn't get no award. Again, a C student in high school. And so I'm a 2.0 in high school, but I did have a 2.5 when it's over with in this 2-year school. So I'm already half a point smarter, right? And so, but I knew I wouldn't get no trophies or any awards. So, and that's cool. I just wanted to be part of the program. So mom went with me, and the president of the college, he got up and they have an award named after him. He's going on and on and on for about 10 minutes about this one person. And I was going, man, I want to meet that person. I leaned over to my mom and said, Mom, I said, we need to meet that guy like that. And then about that time, they announced my name as the award. And I'm going, what? And they're talking about me? And, but yeah, it was called the Hal R. Raymer, who was the president at that time. And it was for overcoming adversities. And so he brought me up to talk about that. And so, but here's what I'm getting to in this. He leaned over to me and whispered, people are watching how you do things because they want to learn to see how strong you are so they can get through a situation. You don't have to know who they are. You don't have to know they're watching, but I'm letting you know they are watching. So the same thing with us. We don't have to know. We won't know a lot of people that we are touching, even if it's planting the seed and growing through somebody else's stuff. We're helping people. It's great to know when we get reinforcement that we really are helping people. That's great. But we don't have to know that.
And that's a great point, James. It always reminds me of when people talk about heroes, and there's various forms that heroes can take. But I always find that the heroes are the ones that are not clamoring for attention. They're not clamoring for the fame and the limelight. They're just getting on. And they're a 14-year-old kid that goes to speak to older people in a long-term care home, for example. It's just, it's like you say, just do good stuff, be a good person. Is it so hard?
Is it so hard with our world today? Isn't that a difficult question to answer for some people? Is it so hard? But here's a great hero story that happened a couple of years ago. Parented this woman, elderly woman was passing away. And this was a different state, not even in my state. But I saw it in the news, read it in the paper. The elderly gentleman, his wife, was passing away. And on her deathbed, he asked, is there something we can do? And she said, for some reason, says, I would love to have a slice of pizza where we first went and dated and stuff like that. They said the pizza joint was in the next state, 200 miles away from them. They had moved away from there. He called them late at night because she's on her deathbed and called the pizza place, explained the situation. Can you stay open long enough for us to get there? Said it's going to take 2-3 hours to get there for us to, and bring it back for her on her deathbed wish. The pizza guy says, don't worry about it. I got to take care of it. He drove all the way to their house to deliver it, gave them the pizza, and drove all the way back that same night to get up to go to work the very next morning. They said it was like a 4-hour trip both ways for him to do that. And so, I mean, and again, he didn't do it out of, look what I did. Hey, ain't I Superman? So, yeah, he did it just because doing the right thing and helping someone else.
And it's probably the best pizza order he's ever had, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. For him, and definitely for the man, the woman on her deathbed, and the husband to reminisce that good old days.
That's incredible. And good people doing good stuff.
Hey, you're doing great things again. So we appreciate you doing it. Yes, this is awesome.
No, thank you, James. And I was going to say, so for people, I mean, I really enjoyed our chat, and I could chat for hours with you. If this was a Joe Rogan show, maybe, and listeners would have 2-3 hours or whatever, but I've really enjoyed
Spotify, I want you to come talk to Dan and my podcast and give us some of Joe Rogan's 100 million y'all gave him. So go ahead and hit us up, Spotify. And if Spotify don't want to, come get us podcast or Podbean or what's all them other ones, Lipson, one of y'all hit us up.
Well, funnily enough, I actually work for a podcast host, so it's funny you mentioned that there. So for people that want to learn more about you or watch your show on YouTube, buy your children's books, etc., where's the best place for them to connect with you?
You can go to, again, I tell people just the easiest thing is go ahead and Google Professor of Perseverance. And that'll lead you to my website, which is professorofperseverance.com. That'll lead you to my YouTube, Professor of Perseverance. That'll lead you to my Facebook, Professor of Perseverance. So just Google Professor of Perseverance. And I'm not sure if that'll work on Amazon, my books. You may have to go in and do James Perdue, and that's Perdue, James Perdue, and then the books would come up. So I need to go fix it on Amazon, Professor of Perseverance, or to fall in line.
It's all about the branding, right?
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll be sure to leave the links for your website, your podcast, and obviously the links to your books on Amazon in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app or you're reading it online, be sure to check out the show notes so it links through to James online where you can connect with him. So again, James, I really appreciate you coming on today. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Thanks for the opportunity to be able to, again, reach out, show some people some journey, give them some hope, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Dan.
So this has been another episode of Podcaster Stories. If you enjoyed this week's episode, be sure to hop on over to podcasterstories.com where you can sign up for the free newsletter or catch up on previous episodes. You can also listen it for free on your favourite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and more. Until the next time, stay safe and take care.